are heading out to a trap full of pigs. I think we've got 20. I think I counted 20 in there. It's hard when they're all moving around and not all of them are in one frame.
We've always thought the war against wild boars was just about building higher fences and stronger traps. That's the story you already know. But the truth is now far more incredible. Farmers are no longer just struggling to hold the line. They are waging a genius-level battle of wits to hunt down thousands of them. And that very success raises a chilling question. By eliminating the weaker boars, are we unintentionally creating a new breed of super-boar? A potentially near-invincible enemy for the future? The first test, the line of intelligence for decades. The war against the wild boar was a frustrating cycle of technology versus raw instinct. Modern tools like electric fences and steel traps, once seen as symbols of human ingenuity, often became unintended tutors, teaching the survivors precisely what to avoid and creating an ever more cautious enemy. In the face of this failing strategy, a return to a stark, almost primal solution emerged. A method that relied not on complex electronics, but on an unflinching understanding of the animal itself. The simple trench. The genius of the trench is its direct assault on the boar's core programming. It works because it exploits a fundamental blind spot in their instinct, their unwavering tendency to charge forward through an obstacle rather than leap over it. This single behavioral trait renders a simple ditch nearly infallible, a physical statement that cannot be pushed, broken, or outmaneuvered by brute force. Its effectiveness was immediate and undeniable, offering a defense where modern technology had consistently fallen short. But this brilliant success concealed a disturbing truth, one that shifted the entire nature of the conflict. The trench was not merely a barrier, it was the first great filter in a massive, unintended intelligence test being conducted on a continental scale. It was a mechanism that began the methodical sorting of the entire boar population into two distinct groups: the aggressive, the impatient. And the instinct-driven individuals failed this test and were effectively removed from the gene pool. The more calculating animals, however, demonstrated a completely different response. Field observations revealed these boars would approach the trench, assess the situation with a chilling level of awareness, and recognize the futility of the challenge. They would simply turn away, conserving their energy and seeking a different path. The method protected a field, but in doing so, it unleashed a new class of adversary back into the wild, a population now stripped of its most reckless members. The war was no longer against a simple mob. It was now against the calculated survivors, the graduates of this first, brutal test. The psychological trap, the selection of caution. The enemy left on the field after the first test was a fundamentally different creature. No longer a mindless horde, but a collection of intelligent problem solvers who had proven they could not be defeated by simple physics. The war, therefore, had to evolve. The new battlefield had to be shifted from the soil and fences of the physical world into a far more complex and dangerous territory: the mind of the wild boar itself. This marked the beginning of a new phase in the conflict. A phase defined not by digging ditches, but by constructing intricate psychological traps, elaborate theaters of security designed to weaponize the animal's own instincts against it. The solution was a system of patient, long-term deception, culminating in the use of sophisticated, remote-triggered corrals. The strategy was a masterful application of behavioral conditioning. For weeks, sometimes even for months, farmers would establish a bait site within the confines of a large, open trap. The gate would be locked in the open position, transforming a cage into a reliable all-you-can-eat buffet. The bait itself was often engineered for maximum appeal, a fermented mixture known as sour mash, whose potent, irresistible aroma could travel on the wind for miles. Acting as a powerful beacon, day after day, the boars would arrive, feed without incident, and leave unharmed. The entire operation was monitored by silent, motion-activated cameras that fed live video back to the farmer. The goal was to methodically erase the animal's innate suspicion, to painstakingly build a new, trusted routine where the trap was no longer a threat, but the single most reliable source of food in their entire territory. This was not merely trapping. It was a slow, calculated campaign of psychological manipulation. When the cameras confirmed that every single member of the sounder, from the youngest piglet to the most dominant boar, was confidently entering the trap to feed, the moment would come, from miles away, with a simple press of a button on a smartphone. The gate would drop in less than a second, securing the entire family group in a single, decisive action. This principle, known as whole sounder removal, was critical because experts understood a devastating truth. The social memory of a wild boar sounder is its most powerful defense. Leaving even one survivor was the equivalent of leaving a living library of warnings, a teacher who would ensure no relative would ever make the same mistake again. The initial success of these systems was staggering. Removing entire populations from properties that had been plagued for years, it appeared to be the perfect solution, a brilliant fusion of patience and technology. But this perfect solution was also the second great filter, and its selection criteria were far more rigorous than the first. The trap was a brutally effective test for impatience, for greed, and for a lack of social awareness. The individuals who rushed in first, who were ruled by their appetite, and who failed to observe the subtle cues of their environment were the ones who were captured. And this is when wildlife researchers began to document a startlingly intelligent counterbehavior in the survivors, a phenomenon known as trap shyness. It was more than simple fear. It was a learned, calculated avoidance. Observers noted that certain older, more experienced matriarchs would consistently refuse to enter the traps. They would stand at a distance, watching, seemingly assessing the situation with a level of perception that was deeply unsettling. They would allow the rest of their family to feed, but they themselves would never cross the threshold if a trap was triggered. These intelligent outsiders became the sole inheritors of the sounder's territory, passing their hyper-cautious genes and their learned wisdom to the next generation. We had successfully waged a war of wits against the boar population. But in doing so, we had only guaranteed that the ones who escaped were the most paranoid, the most patient, and the most capable of recognizing a human deception. They had learned a devastatingly simple new rule for survival: that human generosity is always a lie. To stay alive, they now had to abandon predictable behaviors entirely and retreat to the one domain they believed was still safe from human manipulation: the absolute cover of total darkness. The war on darkness, the culling of instinct. The survivors of the psychological war were a changed species, now operating under a new, hard-earned prime directive: to distrust all human patterns and offerings. Their response was an evolutionary retreat into the one domain they believed remained impenetrable: the absolute sanctuary of the nocturnal world. Darkness became their fortress, a vast black cloak under which they could move and feed with an ancestral confidence that had been shattered during the daylight hours. This was not a minor shift in behavior. It was a fundamental redefinition of their existence. They became creatures of the moon and stars, ceding the sunlit world entirely to their adversary. For a time, this strategy worked, creating a population of intelligent, cautious animals that were simply invisible to the traditional methods of control, effectively winning the war by refusing to fight on their enemies' terms. But the human capacity for invention, when spurred by necessity, is relentless. The conflict entered a new phase, a technological arms race where the very laws of nature were about to be rewritten. The human counter-move was not another trap or a different kind of fence. It was a technological leap so profound that it inverted the very physics of the conflict. The introduction of high-grade thermal imaging scopes onto the battlefield changed everything. This technology did not need moonlight, starlight, or any light at all. It operated in a different spectrum, seeing a world not of reflected photons but of radiated heat. It saw life itself. Suddenly, the Boars' greatest advantage, the impenetrable shield of night, was rendered completely useless. In fact, it became their single greatest liability. Against the cool backdrop of the nighttime landscape, their warm bodies became ghostly white beacons, glowing signatures that could be detected from hundreds of yards away with perfect clarity. Their shield had been transformed into a spotlight. The hunt that followed was unlike any that had come before. It was a silent, methodical, and chillingly effective campaign of eradication. Teams of specialists, often working in direct coordination with farmers, could now scan an entire field in minutes, identifying every living creature with an almost godlike omniscience, paired with sound-suppressed rifles. The process was quiet and surgically precise. This was not the chaotic chase of a traditional hunt. It was a deliberate and calculated removal. The third great filter was now in place, and its purpose was to punish the very instinct that had protected the Boars for millennia. The selection pressure was no longer against aggression or impatience. It was now against the simple, predictable, hardwired instinct to trust in the cover of darkness. The trap-shy Boars, who had learned to avoid a baited cage but still followed their ancient feeding routes under the night sky, were now the most vulnerable. Their faith in the darkness had become their final, fatal flaw. Once again, the strategy was devastatingly successful, and once again, it created a new, more refined class of survivor. For if the vast majority of the nocturnal population was being removed, what of the tiny fraction that was not? Who were the individuals that evaded even this all-seeing eye? They were the phantoms. They were the Boars that, through some combination of sheer luck, extreme sensitivity, or a level of awareness that bordered on the paranormal, did not follow the predictable patterns. These were the animals that would abandon a feeding ground for no discernible reason, that moved in erratic and illogical ways, or that seemed to possess an ability to sense a human presence from astonishing distances, even when that presence was silent and hidden a quarter-mile away. We had taken the darkness away from them, and in doing so, we had filtered for a creature that no longer needed it. The survivors were now not only intelligent and cautious, they were profoundly unpredictable. The new enemy was a ghost, and the question became almost existential. How do you possibly hunt an animal that seems to know you are coming before you even arrive? The chess match of seasons, the survival of the resilient. The war against the wild boar had now reached a level of staggering complexity. The remaining adversary was no longer a simple animal. It was a finely honed survivor, a graduate of a brutal, multi-generational training program that had systematically eliminated every weakness. This was an enemy that had proven itself resistant to physical barriers, immune to psychological deception, and capable of evading even the most advanced technological surveillance. The direct, head-on conflict was failing because the enemy had become a phantom, a creature that refused to play by any predictable set of rules. Faced with this seemingly impossible challenge, the most successful farmers and land managers realized they had to abandon the idea of a single, decisive battle. The conflict had to become a long, drawn-out campaign of attrition, a grand chess match played not over days or weeks, but across the vast, cyclical board of the entire year. The new strategy was based on a profound and deeply strategic understanding of the boar's biology and its unbreakable connection to the rhythm of the seasons. This was a war of logistics, of resource denial, and of exploiting the subtle, seasonal weaknesses that even the most intelligent creature cannot escape. The first major offensive of this new campaign began in the dead of winter. This was the time of greatest vulnerability. The cold, harsh months forced the boars to burn immense amounts of energy just to stay alive, while their natural food sources, like acorns and hickory nuts, had become scarce or were buried under frozen ground. This biological desperation, as farmers called it, became the trapper's greatest ally. It was a powerful, internal pressure that could force even the most cautious, trap-shy survivor to reconsider its options. A strategically placed, minimally disguised bait site was no longer an obvious deception. It was a potential lifeline. This winter campaign was brutally effective, often accounting for the removal of a significant percentage of the remaining population. This was the fourth great filter, and its selection criteria were biological. It tested for the inability to endure hardship. But then came the spring, and the entire board changed. The world exploded with new life, and with it, a natural buffet that made the farmers' bait piles suddenly unappealing. Newly planted crops, emerging insects, frogs, and snakes provided an abundance of high-energy food. The boars, now free from the desperation of winter, became bold and destructive once again, targeting the very crops that symbolized new growth. The strategy had to shift instantly from passive trapping to active, aggressive defense. The thermal scopes came out of their cases once more, but the hunt was different. This was not a general cull. It was a targeted removal of the large, dominant boars and bachelor groups that were smart enough to have survived the winter traps and were now leading the charge on the fields. It was a high-stakes irony. The very individuals clever enough to pass the winter test were now the primary targets of the spring campaign. As the oppressive heat of summer arrived, the game shifted again. The surviving boars, the absolute smartest of the smart, retreated into the coolest, most inaccessible parts of the terrain. But the summer created another biological imperative just as powerful as winter's hunger: the desperate need for water. Since pigs cannot sweat, they are prisoners of hydration. They must visit water sources, cool mud wallows, and shaded river bottoms to survive the heat. This weakness became the new focus of the campaign. Instead of hunting the boars, hunters began to hunt the water. Dozens of high-definition cameras were deployed, not to find the animals themselves, but to find their single point of failure. This required a level of patience that was almost meditative, a process of slowly building a map of routines and patterns, waiting for the one moment when the ghost would be forced to reveal itself. Finally, the unpredictability of fall demanded a hybrid approach, a constant shifting of strategies to match the chaotic conditions. As crops matured and acorns began to drop, the boars were lured into different areas, their patterns disrupted by this new abundance. Compounding this, the start of deer hunting season on neighboring properties would often drive new, uneducated sounders onto a farm overnight, resetting the game entirely. The chess match was no longer just against the survivors, but against a constant stream of new players. This year-long campaign was the ultimate test. It was a filter that selected for a level of resilience and adaptability that was almost unbelievable. The individuals who survived this relentless, year-round pressure were not just smart, cautious, and unpredictable. They were the ultimate survivalists, masters of their environment who had proven they could withstand any trap, any technology, and any strategy that humanity could throw at them. They had proven they could survive anything, except for one final, inescapable truth. They could not survive the combined, coordinated intelligence of their greatest enemy. Breaking the cycle. When genius is not enough at this point in our story, we must confront the chilling answer to the question posed at the very beginning. The evidence is undeniable. Every brilliant strategy, every technological marvel, and every act of human ingenuity deployed in this war has indeed been part of an unintentional, grand-scale eugenics program. The answer is yes. We have been systematically breeding a super-boar. Each victory on the battlefield was, in reality, a step in an evolutionary arms race, a process where every clever solution acted as a rigorous filter, guaranteeing that the only individuals left standing were smarter, more cautious, and more resilient than the generation that came before them. The cycle was clear and deeply paradoxical. The better we became at hunting them, the better they became at surviving us. This feedback loop of escalating intelligence and adaptability had created an adversary that seemed poised to become an unstoppable force of nature, a testament to the raw power of natural selection under extreme pressure. So where is the escape if a single farmer, no matter how brilliant, only contributes to this dangerous cycle? How can the war ever truly be won? The answer, it turns out, does not lie in a more advanced thermal scope or a more psychologically devious trap. The answer lies in a complete and total paradigm shift, a move away from the isolated genius of the individual and towards the overwhelming power of collective, coordinated action. The final solution is not a weapon, it is a strategy that seeks not to filter the enemy, but to completely and utterly remove the environment in which the enemy can learn and evolve. The most successful eradication programs in history, such as the efforts seen in regions of Illinois and Kansas, demonstrate this principle with stunning clarity. They succeeded where individuals had failed because they changed the fundamental rules of the game. When every single landowner, every agency, and every stakeholder across a vast, contiguous area acts in perfect unison, the dynamic shifts. The boars are no longer being pushed from one hard target to a neighboring soft target, where they can recover and adapt. Instead, they are met with a unified, inescapable, and comprehensive pressure from all sides. There is no longer a place to run, no safe haven in which to learn from a failed attack, and no time to pass on newly acquired survival traits to the next generation. The evolutionary feedback loop is broken because there are no survivors left to carry the lesson forward. This coordinated approach is the final, decisive move in the long chess match. It is the recognition that the true adversary was never the intelligence of a single boar, but the fragmentation and lack of cooperation among the human landowners. Trail camera footage has shown with stark clarity how a single sounder can appear on one property on a Monday night, and then 2 miles away on a completely different farm by Wednesday. This mobility is their greatest strategic advantage, and it can only be countered by creating a network of human cooperation that is even larger and more agile than the network of the boars themselves. The genius required to win this war was never about outsmarting one animal. It was about humans finally learning to outsmart their own instincts for isolation and territoriality. In the end, this long and brutal conflict teaches us a profound lesson: that the ultimate force multiplier is not technology, but trust. The war against the wild boar shows us that while the brilliance of an individual can win a battle, only the unified intelligence of a community can win the war, ensuring that there is no perfect enemy left for tomorrow.